Oh, thanks, Monkey. This is your fault. I blame you for this Trundle priority that has come across. But that is a great point to make. I will say, I know Nefiri priority has really started to fall off compared to earlier, but Tarzan has been one of the biggest proponents of a B1 Nefiri lock-in of anybody, especially this late into the year. But I like the Annie ban because, like you called out in Game 2 draft, the best setup champion for that Nefiri is the reliable Annie, but Gwen slipping through for the first time in this series, Flandre will happily gobble that one up.
Yeah, we were talking about that in the ban phase. It's clear that that is the avenue AL wanted to go there. On blue side, they understand that you can't give it to Breathe. It's his best champion. You got to take it away, and that's what Flandre does at the beginning of this draft. And especially with a lot of things off the board, there aren't super clean answers to Gwen left available. You know, you've got things like Rumble that are traditionally considered the easier answers off the board because of Fearless, but it could just be the Xayah Rakan first rotation for Weibo. I thought this is what they were going to go for last game. You know, things like the Ezreal banned out, but it's actually going to be the early Lovers duo coming in as a potentially stable and self-protective bot for Weibo Gaming.
And also one of the best champions we've seen Erha on, and that Rakan was huge. Got a win on this very lock-in up against JDG just a couple of days ago. Big spot here for Flandre, though. We talked about how invisible the Nidalee became as that game went on. Completely opposite trajectory with this Gwen. You, the later the game goes, become Exodia. Similarly compared to that Ezreal that scales up pretty nicely once you get to the 3-item breakpoint. But you got to keep that lane threatening for Hope and Kael, who have been one of the best in lane when it comes to all the bottom lanes in the LPL. And Karma Ezreal is pretty oppressive, even into the safety that Xayah can bring.
It's very clear the directive for AL is get Light and Erha uncomfortable in the early game. They don't want to let them be able to get any sort of lead in the 2v2. That's been the case through all 3 drafts up until this point. I would say game 1 maybe less so because the Varus probably should have won, but didn't quite get there. But specifically games 2 and 3, that's been a clear directive to take Light and Erha out of that early game decision-making. Will be the Rise locked in for Xiaohu. We saw what he could do on a champion like Talia that had so much priority in game number 2 where he could open up the map a bit more. This also gives you a few more options in terms of the junglers that you could play for because of the immediate amount of support at level 6 from the Rise, but you're definitely creating a bit of a level 6 power spike for Weibo Gaming here. The Rise ult coming in, the Rakan ult coming in, Xayah ult coming in, a lot of things that really rely on you getting to those breakpoints that make it a bit more difficult to react early if plays are made on the other side.
And now what we're looking for here for AL is setup. They need to just really index into pure setup by this point. You have a Karma, you have a Gwen, you have an Ezreal. You need to point this sort of Gatling gun of damage you've created in the right direction. So I like the Galio ban, not only because you see an AP mid laner, but that's a huge setup piece. Now, take away one of Tarzan's best setup champions left around. As you mentioned, we've kind of already lost some of the priority. Poppy's already off the board. I'm thinking like Wukong is there, J4 if you want to dip into that pool. We need to see a champion that facilitates the way Tarzan was able to facilitate for AL in game 1, and we see the J4 taken away. Weibo recognizing what AL need with the rest of their draft.
You're absolutely right. There are plenty of facilitative champions up, though. I think things like Wukong are definitely still on the board. Worth noting, Xin Zhao is available in this draft, and you could definitely go that direction. That would probably be what I would prioritize. That's likely to be R4 if AL don't ban it here, or at least I would guess that's likely to be R4. Xin Zhao Rise is terrifying to have to play into in terms of the skirmish potential, so it's actually going to be the Wukong taken off the board. It could be a Maokai angle. That's really kind of what I'm looking at for Tarzan here. I think that would add some stability, and it would allow you to play more aggressive through Shanks and whatever you want to go with, and as that counter to Rise. But I would very much expect this to be the jungle pick. I think could be top lane as well. Also, Breathe has played Rise in the past. Not going to throw that out too much, but with Xin Zhao up, I would just be stunned if that's not the selection.
All right, so the champion that was S+ tier in the jungle for so long has been slipping through drafts here and finally gets through a ban phase, and as you call it, Tian locks that one in. We'll see what Shanks wants to do. As we talked about, AL have found a lot of success when they give Shanks his counter pick. He had that in game 2. Was not able to make a lot out of that one. Sylas is going to potentially be the lock-in here. A lot of quality ultimates to steal, markedly the Crescent Guard, and I feel like the quickness, those charms being able to come across are a big threat there. So Shanks going to try and play somewhat of the facilitator role. Not impossible with the Sylas, but what does Tarzan want? Because that hole is still very prevalent in this comp. this would be so fun, but just I don't. Does this work? I don't think this works.
No way it works. Yeah, that makes more sense.
There we go. Okay. Yep.
Yeah, we get the bear coming in. I do want to quickly touch upon the mid lane matchup because I think that it's important to talk about Shanks' Sylas. This is his best champion, I think, in terms of his career. I would have to look at the games played mark and see, the stats on it, but just from the eye test, this has always been the thing he's been feared for the most in the LPL, as we see the Sion come in to round out kind of that front-to-back comp that the Xayah and the Ryze can facilitate coming in on the other side, but it's just a lot of comfort coming in from anyone's legend. I want to say, as a mid lane player, I can offer a little bit of knowledge into this matchup. A lot of people like the Sylas because it can match the Realm Warp. Ryze with the root can really make Sylas's life a lot harder in these team fights and can actually create a lot of situations where he can't function as aggressively as he wants to. So it's really going to be on Shanks to play aggressive. But when you look at these two comps combined, I think it's pretty clear where the directive goes. I think the Ryze is going to be massive this game from Xiaohu. They're really putting him into a spot where he needs to step up. I think if you're looking at blue side, I'd love to see, once again, a bot lane focus game coming in from anyone's legend. I think that's where the priority could go, but it's all going to be really about which part of the middle of the map can push forward and whether or not that Gwen can become that, as you said, Exodia that really obliterates the game.
Because they have an early game set up for not just success for Flandre in that aspect, but it's the added adage of being able to have him set up for success on his own and then play towards that bottom lane. I think while Weibo I think both these teams actually have drafted themselves into exactly the play style they like to do. You called it Weibo. They want to infinitely scale. They want to front to back through team fights the way that they were able to get done so many times against JDG to find that upset. But AL have themselves an early game comp where Tarzan can play for bot side, play for those leads, and then allow Flandre to just do his own thing and scale on this Gwen. That's why this game feels so massive, because this game, this very draft you're getting in front of you guys, not only for the rubber match to split this series up, put somebody on match point, it fits into the narrative style that we were talking about for these two teams, Kman, from the jump on this broadcast.
So we get those Gyos coming in.
I could see the Weibo fan that's just screaming, too. Shout out that guy.
Yeah.
Holy moly, he's into it.
If you're not impassioned by a 1-1 series between AL and Weibo in the playoffs, then I don't know what to do. I don't know how to get you excited. Like, this is what you build for if you're, one of these top teams. This is a top 4 matchup going on right now, but you're absolutely right. I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of where these teams' priorities are at. Weibo scales incredibly well. That Xayah is going to become, an X factor in the back half of the game, likely the strongest champion as long as Light can receive even the smallest amount of resources throughout this game, but it's really Xiaohu on this Ryze that I'm going to be looking at. If he can get a lead early, which I think is totally possible, especially pre-6, into the matchup with Sylas, I think things can get a little bit dicey for anyone's legend, and so watching Xiaohu's going to be big, but how can you not point out the junglers? Volley Bear versus Xin Zhao, we're going to see some skirmishes, and we're going to see some exchanges that could really dictate the tempo of the game.
A lot of champions have struggled to not only keep up, but try and match the skirmish power of a Xin Zhao in the early phase. PTA Volley Bear from Tarzan might be one of those few that can answer the call. Start with our bottom lanes once again. Looking for Kael and Hope to use their double poke power to take control of this lane like they have all series long, and it looks like once again through sheer might, they might set themselves up for an early level 2 as we have both our junglers pathing away from each other. Tian might make it a priority to make sure that Flandre doesn't get too comfortable into a fairly controlled topside matchup like we talked about, but Breathe is making me eat my words pretty quickly here.
Yeah, I don't actually think this is super dominant for the Gwen. I think it's really easy for Sion to stall this lane out, especially if there's any attention from the Xin Zhao, if he wants to, put anything on the top side, which he is pathing up towards there right now. I think it's pretty easy for both of these, champions to really just kind of get to that mid-game power spike that they're looking at. But as you can see, some pretty nice win rates coming in from the side of AL. I think part of that has to do with just how much they win, but these are champions that these guys are comfortable on, specifically Hope on the Ezreal at 6-1. That's a really, really nice record. And, I called it out before. Shanks' Sylas was something he was known for, even before coming over here to Anyone's Legend when he was on WE. So
yep.
This is certainly a comfortable draft, and we can see a lot of games played for Weibo Gaming on these champions, but maybe not quite as much individual success. Erha, of course, being that exception, 5-0 on the Rakan.
Like we talked about in draft, the 5th win in a row on that champion came A couple days ago, their opening bout against JDG, kick off these playoffs. 6 in a row would feel so nice to put Weibo on the precipice of an even bigger upset. We are a long ways away from that for now. We are spotlighting these junglers as they make their priorities known, as Tian, through his full clear, is going right after Flandre on this top side. Does have the flash on the Gwen, immediately matched. The 5-point strike gets the knockup win, becomes lightning, and Tian is back, wrecking the early game, matching Tarzan and maybe outperforming him, as there's no response from the Volibear. This mid lane gank is going to fizzle out, and first blood goes to Tian.
Ask and I shall receive. I literally got done talking about how Tian was likely going to spend some time going to the top side and how Sion could actually be in a good spot because of it. And lo and behold, first blood going over to that Sion with a really nice gank from Tian. That's a nice setup. Like I said, I think this is, a much more neutral game state. And with the swap coming in with Light so early on, 4 minutes into the game coming into the top side, after that Sion picked up that first blood, you're going to be in a spot where this Gwen is going to have no resources coming out of the early game. It's going to take her a little bit more time to actually get online and get to that stage where she's going to become a nuisance in those fights.
I'm a huge fan of this because the flip side of this, right? This is a Sion for Breathe. This guy doesn't care about gold, farm, resources. He's just stacking his passive. He'll easily handle giving up, some gold to Kael and hope. Kael is looking to get back out on the map here and put his Xiaohu. Does get the root down, holding on to his flash. Abscond duck. Not going to be pushed through by Shanks, and Xiaohu kind of playing chicken game with his own flash, and he wins it at this point.
Yeah, I think this is kind of why Ryze feels okay in this matchup, is because Sylas has almost no kill pressure, even with a lot of assistance. Now, Tarzan could potentially change that because the Volibear is quite strong. Yeah, spotted. So he's not going to be successful in terms of creating opportunities there, but Xiaohu should be relatively safe in the early game here. He is going to have to back. No teleport available, so see if he actually does it. Yeah, definitely didn't see that as the primary option, just going to catch the wave. But Dragon started here by AL. We've actually seen a significant lack in early Dragon priority, like pre-grub spawn, not only throughout this series, but throughout the LPL. So it's nice to see a team, finally say, screw it, we have Volibear, we can take this early.
I like Kael's approach to this lane swap, though, as an answer. He recognizes, hey, listen, Ezreal, so safe. Hope has really got him in this position with summoners up to ever be in threat for Breathe to kill him. And there's no reason for me to stay down here trying to get, a major push going. Kael's trying to do what he might do best. One of the premier roaming supports of the LPL. He's just trying to get on the map constantly. You saw the mid gank we talked about. He helps with the Dragon to get Tarzan going. This is a huge reason why Kael is a first-team all-pro support this split in the LPL.
Yeah, I mean, you can just talk about how he's everywhere on the map all the time. This has always been what he's so good at as a player. It's just being proactive everywhere on the map. It feels like there's 3 of them at any given time, but, for Hope to be in such a good spot, 61 CS here at 6 minutes into the game, really farming up well, I think that's going to be big. We talked about the Ezreal needing to get some gold in the early game. When you're talking about these mid-game skirmishes, that's where Ezreal, in particular, is really going to be peaking as a champion, and so if you can get him in those exchanges around the Rift Herald, that's going to be, the Void Grubs, I should say, that's definitely going to be very important for AL moving forward.
Definitely going to pull on my own experience as a Ezreal connoisseur to track that as the game goes on. Skirmishing power you're talking about, obviously looking to get to the Trinity Force Moramana spike as quickly as you can for Hope. He's going to get jumped on here potentially by Erha. Slippery Rakan, though, so every grand entrance got to take with a grain of salt. Hope gets some solid damage back down as we get the Aussie lineup lanes. Bot lanes both towards the top side with those grubs spawning soon. Tarzan, off his full clear, should be in actually a much better position to try and grab first 3 grubs and first Drake. He's got his bottom lane getting that push going again. Fluid map movement from AL like we hyped up to start off this show.
I really want to point something out. Hope is a full level up on Light. Like almost a full level up. Like level 6 to level 5, and Light is just hitting the halfway point. This is a problem for Weibo Gaming. This Xayah is really far behind in this early game in terms of how things have gone. Not really sure how we got to that spot. It was the early swap for Light. You would have thought that you could take advantage of the Gwen a bit more, but Light has really struggled to be able to maintain any sort of consistency, and we highlighted this. This is like a problem for Weibo Gaming that they've consistently run into, and because of this, Tarzan can very freely start up these grubs, and it's going to be difficult for Weibo to make their way down as Light just hit level 6.
Shanks gonna hijack that crescent guard. First scrub gonna be smited away by Tarzan. As we talked about, the bottom lane Prowl comes across. Light has to catch this top wave, so hoping Kael can move on down, and Weibo have to be really mindful of how long they want to stay here. Second grub gonna go down. Tarzan secures that feats of monster slaying. They use the heal to speed up Erha. Doesn't have the ultimate. They're gonna force Stormbreaker out of Tarzan. That's a very small price to play for 2 grubs, and now they're going to look for the fight. The Realm Warp is not going to get through with Xiaohu. He steps on out of it. Cries guard got hijacked here by Shanks. He's in a 1v1 with Tian. Light can't get any damage down. Flash out from Shanks. Featherstorm comes down. Xiaohu very low, but still trying to hold on the front line. But his jungler falls. His AD carry flashes away, but Erha cannot escape home, who flies over the wall, nearly hits the Mystic Shot onto Xiaohu. An utter collapse around the Rift Herald pit here. Grubs, kills, everything. True shot barrages, feats of warfare. What is AL not gaining right now is they're wrecking the early game. One more kill into Light, and it's the perfect start for anyone's legend.
It's the perfect fight. I don't know what Weibo were thinking. They overextend. I think they must just forget that Shanks is making his way up from the mid lane. He finds a really nice flank angle, and at first it looks like it could potentially be turned onto the Sylas because he doesn't really have the survivability, but there is so much damage coming in from Hope. We highlighted the difference in terms of XP and CS between that Ezreal and the Xayah, and boy did it play itself out in that fight. We're gonna get a replay. It's a gorgeous stun from Tarzan to start things up. It looks like it's going to be a really nice fight from Tian, but the stolen crescent guard from Shanks actually matters so much. It's beautiful. Tarzan just not dying on the front line, and Hope this entire time just pumping out damage on the back end of this fight. Becomes super easy. We end up, you know, getting a little bit of damage onto Light that really contributes to the dive later on, and then, of course, the ultimate from Hope to be able to snipe away the Rise. That mid laner from Weibo Gaming not walking out alive. It ends up being a huge win for AL, and a comp that we talked about needing to get on the board early did exactly that.
And while we talked about going on to the Rift here, Kman, that this game in particular fit the expectations and the style that we expect from both these teams. The scaling team fight basis of Weibo and the early game dominance of AL. This is the very outcome we were worried about in our predictions, right, Kman? That the AL supremacy on the map would force Weibo into dire straits. But even then, this is more disastrous than I could have imagined off of one Grub's play. This is a huge hole to get out of already for a team that needed to be somewhat competitive gold-wise once they got to that front-to-back style that they are hoping for with the Rise and the Xayah and a tanky Scion, like you were highlighting.
Yeah, I mean, there is an out for Weibo, right? Like, if the Xayah can continue to scale up, she's going to be, you know, eventually strong, but she's 1k gold down on the Ezreal, and it's not like Ezreal's going to do 0 damage in the late game. Like, that champion's still going to be a problem. We already see the dragon stacking. Second dragon at 11 minutes here for AL. We're going to get a chance to see what the soul will be. It's going to be Ocean Soul as well for this team, and so everything kind of coming up golden right now for anyone's legend, but really the thing I'm going to be looking at is you have to start utilizing these Realm Warps coming in from Xiaohu to try to get some gold back, try to find some picks somewhere on the map with the Xin Zhao. This could be one of them, but you know, Tarzan shadowing Kael means no play to be had.
What a spot for Hope. A player that I personally, you know, diagnosed certain parts of his play that I wanted to see kicked up for AL once they got to the playoffs. Biggest spot that I need to meet that mark is a Game 3 to go to the upper bracket finals to get to match point. He has got his Trinity Force at 12 minutes done on this Ezreal. Its damage is ludicrous by this point. It's all about hitting your skill shots and being a big bad carry.
Tian?
But we take the focus off of Hope right now. Tian might just get completely caught. Might was putting it a little bit lightly. Totally caught. And another gifted kill from Weibo, mispositioned on the map.
I can't fathom what just happened. He knew he was on vision. He had vision of them roaming up, and he just stayed? Okay, sure. Like, maybe that's, I guess if Tian just expedited back, whatever you want to call that. That was a very, very strange play coming in from the jungler for Weibo Gaming that ends up giving quite a lot of gold over to AL, but you know, we talk about the, you know, I think you've highlighted, and it correctly so, that this is kind of the early game identity versus the late game identity. we're talking about the early game team having an Ezreal who's accelerated and a Gwen. Like, this is not a comp that's going to fall off in terms of damage in the later part of the game. You still have plenty of tools to be able to win. I also think their split push is quite good if they do want to go the 1-3-1 route with the way that they have their comp set up. So a lot of options for AL. For Weibo now, you just have to try and neutralize some of these objectives. Again, trying to find picks, you have to utilize that Rise ultimate. Without the Realm Warp, without Tian moving around the map, I don't really see a way for you to be able to get back into this.
Right now, I just fear that they're going to get out-gold diffed in team fights right now, and as the game goes on, you called out the split pushing and also the fact that they're going to have to answer a Rift Herald, a third Drake at 15.5 minutes for Soul Point. Weibo might just get pushed and pulled around the map too much to ever really find the footing of this front-to-back fight. Shades of how Game 1 came crumbling down for WBG.
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear to look at. I think, you know, a lot of people might see Gwen and Ezreal as maybe not the most proactive champions, but you have to remember, Volibear Sylas is not necessarily a mid-jungle duo that's going to scale quite like the Ryze Xayah will into the late game, and so, you know, there is some pressure. Like, Volibear in particular, yeah, just not going to be the most dominant, but Rift Herald spawning 40.
That's what Tarzan does, though, right? Like, that's all his identity is about, is setting up his scalers to thrive. And that's why AL are such a perennial contenders. They were in Split 1 finals. We expect them to be back. We expect them to go to MSI. It's because we call them an early game stylistically, but it's through their setup guys in their superstar Tarzan. Because like you mentioned, they draft scalers. They just play from a macro standpoint the best in the early game, that they get those scalers online faster than anybody.
No, and you're absolutely right, Slayer. I'm really glad you highlighted it, because I just think AL deserves more credit for what they've been able to do, as we see Breathe proxying, as Scions tend to do. But I just want to give this team as much props as possible. It's not that we're sitting here saying, oh, every team would have won the way AL won at that fight, or had been able to push their lead the way AL's been able to push their lead. Anyone's Legend is one of the best teams in the world at being able to do this, and we continuously see it as we see an exchange on the top side. Shanks is definitely starting to come online now, and unfortunately, this is the part of the game where Ryze is supposed to be strong. See if that exchange comes in. Rift Herald could be a fight here.
So here's the push and pull, right? They teleport both top laners over. Weibo have made it a point to try and neutralize Rift Herald. Xiaohu's going to use that Realm Warp to just get back to his team, get over the top of Shanks, cut off that flank angle. So you set up the 5v5 lines, you set up your front to back, but are Weibo strong enough at this point to try and fit their style? They're going to start by 50-50 this Rift Herald. Tian does win it. We have both mid laners going bull for bull, but the stolen Crescent Guard from Shanks provides so much value that Xiaohu goes down first. Breathe on the front line with the scissors is going to snip his way home through everybody. How much does your Herald cost you, Weibo? Because Hope is looking to clean house. Tian dies. Breathe is next to fall. Here comes the early game might of anyone's Legends to the tune of a 16-minute 4-for-1. But it should darn be an ace as long as they get through this tanky Scion. They let him get back to base. So it's not an ace, but it's a resounding win once more as anyone's Legends push the snowball further down the mountain.
Shanks is so clean on Sylas. There is nothing else to say. That stolen Crescent Guard coming in clutch for the second time already in this game. We see the flank coming in. He's got the Xin Zhao ultimate. Xiaohu trying to zone him off as much as he can, but Shanks can heal through all of the Ryze damage, even though Tian is able to smite out the Rift Herald. We'll talk about how he's not able to get it, and Shanks just destroying the backline before completely erupting this fight later on. It's just massive coming in from him. Hope obviously doing a ton of damage to be able to push forward as well alongside Flandre, but all of that for a Rift Herald that you weren't even able to collect. Yeah. You smited it, but you didn't pick it up, and yes, you're going to be able to get a dragon here that's going to potentially... Well, I say that. Tarzan's in the area. Tarzan,
does he want to go for it? No. Great entrance there from Erha. Make sure that Tarzan can't get close enough. Shanks, though, has the quickness stolen. How many people can he get close to? He finds Light of all members. Burns through that first health bar. Blasco going to save Xiaohu. He still gets the route through. Does Hope want it? Can he get the arcane shift up in time? No. That kill will not be found. But it still costs Weibo mightily to stop the stacking. Still stalled out nonetheless. This game state that Weibo are desperately trying to slow down.
absolutely unreal gameplay coming in from AL. They are pushing tempo over and over again. This is exactly what we talked about in the pre-show, where we talked about how AL are so good at flexing their early game strength into fast plays that never really stop, and about how Weibo, at their best, have been really good at slowing down the pace of the game. Right now, it's just not possible for them. AL have so much control, and really the only thing I can say for Weibo is that, yes, you could theoretically have some scaling. This game hasn't gotten fully out of control yet. You do stop the dragon scaling, but with Light being 0 and 3 and so far behind Hope in terms of gold, with the Rise not being anywhere near online, it's looking very, very scary for Weibo Gaming, and this was the fear. Bad early game, bad game overall.
Very few teams, if any, have ever come back against AL. And we talked about how they did split a lot of series against the rest of the top 4. Top Esports kind of had AL's number in the early season after beating them in split 1 finals. But even then, right, Top, their wins were getting that lead ahead of AL and not letting them play comfortable. Even Top Esports might struggle to play back from a spot like this against AL. Xiaohu going for one of those realm warps to get a 4 versus 1 into Flandre. They get the charm, grand entrance knock up. Flandre, can he find a trade? Not this time, 1 versus 4. The needlework, though, buys him so much healing. Thankfully, Breathe is a takey Scion. Oh my God, Xiaohu nearly went back down to that heated up turret. But here's the trade, Kman. You sent 4 bot lane for 1 Gwen. Is the gold even worth it at the end of the day after this tier 2 falls?
Well, it's not just tier 2 mid, it's tier 2 top as well. Look at Shanks split pushing. This will eventually go down, or I imagine this will eventually go down with Tarzan on the top side, Kael making his way up. And this is really not a good trade or game state, but what else is there to do? The only thing to try to do here for Weibo Gaming is to utilize those Realm Warps to try to find picks. That's exactly what you did. The problem is Flandre is not easily killable. It took them so long to take down the Gwen that it ended up creating a situation that wasn't even really favorable. So we'll get a replay here. Flandre does buffer the knockup there from Breathe. He clears the wave, but... Oh, yeah, we are seeing some fighting.
We're brawling. Tarzan wants Tian's number. That's Crescent Guard already out of the Zitz so all of Ezreal's damage pours through with a couple of W's and Q's like that. Tian's off the map, and what timing is that for AL? Otacon spawns just a couple of paces away from them on the top side, and that is a guarantee off 1 single kill.
Yeah, it's pretty easy for anyone's legend. Tian wants to, I don't know, try to exist in his own jungle. I think he should know by this point that that's probably not allowed to happen at this point in this game, and unfortunately getting picked off there, allowing that Otacon to go over is just going to exacerbate the negatives that Weibo Gaming already had. It already looked very contentious for them to be able to win team fights, but with that new version of the Otacon that has the splash damage, it's just really difficult to imagine a world where the 5v5s are in their favor, even with the scaling right now.
I mean, we can look at the items across the board, and I really want to point them out by this juncture, because we were calling out some of those scalers, like item breakpoints they can make. It's like the observers are really keen that something's about to kick off here, nonetheless, as they are depriving us of that scoreboard. Yeah, so Maramana, Ezreal, with Trinity Force done, this is the huge first jump, right? The Spirit Shojin will be coming 3rd. That's the, max cap of the 3 item. But we've got a confident book purchase here from Shanks. He has 12 stacks on that. The Riftmaker Nashers is the first big breakpoint for Gwen. The items are really coming through from that lead out of the early game that might make this game just unplayable for Weibo.
Yeah, and you're talking about all these 3rd item breakpoints. Rise is sitting on Rod of Ages. This is a problem. This is not good for Weibo Gaming. It's not a good game state to be in. We see Weibo potentially trying to bait a fight. I'm not really sure why. They would get toasted if they ended up fighting right now, so would be very concerning. Flandre a little bit low health. Tian potentially making his way to the top side, but he's being shadowed by the rest of his team. We'll see if they can make this play happen fast enough.
Flandre is... okay, you know what? We played a little bit too much health bar roulette there, Flandre. He took a lot of early damage before that dive was really manifesting. Ale, we're in a great position to try and maybe contest it, but they recognize on the rest of the map there are bigger things to gain. A bot wave gets shoved in. I thought they were going to try and index into this dragon, but Weibo are forcing AL to match for once here, knowing that the threat of another tier 2 going down would be a big gold injection. So we've got all of the 4-stack of Anyone's Legends in this topside jungle to cover Shanks, who is going to shut down the push onto this tier 2 turret. Do Weibo overstay their welcome here, getting desperate to try and fight their way back into this game? They've got Breathe. He's going to tank up the turret, but that turret is not low enough for you to try and take down all on your own. And AL are trying to sniff out a potential flank here. Flandre respawns without teleport, though. Everyone will settle back down and take their resets.
Yeah, it's really not as big of a gold lead as you would think, because it's actually a gold lead on the top side for Breathe, and Tian's up in gold as well onto Tarzan's Volibear. Some way, somehow, we are sitting in that world, but even still, like, it's a nice pick, it's a nice play, and Weibo ends up getting some pressure back because of it. It's not enough to completely change the game at all. AL's going to be able to pick up their third dragon here. This is Soul Point, and it's Ocean Soul, which would be a complete game over for Gwen Silas. That makes that team fight nearly impossible. Those champions will almost never die with the sheer amount of healing and survivability that both of them have. And so, you know, while that third dragon might be going down, it's that fourth one that's really going to be the main priority. Minute 30 on to Baron. That's going to be the priority here for both of these teams. I really want to see Weibo get as much a vision priority as possible because they're not going to have the chance in 30 seconds.
They're still waiting on really big damage out of their carries. And look at Shanks on the flank. His Pandit Silas. How many charms can he get? Gets one on the light, forces out the Featherstorm. Tarzan does get brunted. He's just knocked up. CC lock. Tarzan goes down first. What do anyone's lunges look like without the spirit, the superstar of their team? It's Shanks to come to rescue. Scott and duck forward. They try and get onto Flandre. The Realm Warp gets all of Weibo out. Just when they might have had a good fight, decent chance, but Hope too far up on the front line, gets caught. The Realm Warp comes across, the root is down, the knockups are through, but Flandre is still standing tall next to Shanks. Shutdowns are coming across, but nobody can touch the Silas. Shanks is now the only one left in a 1 versus 2. Xiaohu will go down next. It's only the tanky Breathe. 2 solo lanes, 2 sides of opposite coins, going blow for blow, but Shanks just keeps on churning, burning, pushing the damage out. Can he break through Breathe's shield? It's taking so much. He's just spamming away at his keys, but Breathe walks out of all of it.
Oh, what a fight for AL. What a fight for Shanks. What a fight for Weibo Gaming. I mean, that's just, there's cinema all over the map in terms of how that ended up going. It actually was a really great fight from Weibo. They do a great job locking down Tarzan at the beginning. The Volibear is completely non-existent. We talked about this being an early game comp. Part of that is because the volley falls off so much in the late game, and we're going to get a little bit of a replay here of what ends up happening. Shanks thinks he's found this Exodia flank, and I think so as well, but Light with a really well-timed ultimate keeps him from ever getting charmed up. And because Tarzan ends up going down first, Shanks has to utilize his flash just to kill Tian. And while Flandre is trying to push through the rest of this fight, you got the Realm Warp out. Now, if they had just committed to staying out of this fight, it would have been a positive play, but Hope stepping up too much. They feel confident to go forward. They're able to land a lot of damage down. The problem is exactly what we've been talking about. This Ryze does not have nearly enough gold to be able to finish off this fight. If Xiaohu was in even a remotely better spot, this is a win for Weibo, but Shanks, with his healing, with his damage, is able to completely take over. 8,000 damage coming in from him in that fight.
I will say, though, that is the worrying trend for how much we've propped up Hope. The Jhin game was big. He was deathless on this Ezreal. A big reason why we worry about getting hands checked is the definition we always throw around for AL is that Hope can sometimes have those bad positioning moments, and that Cardinal Ezreal sin of Arcane shifting forward out of vision is what really cost them because he is so much consistent damage outside of that Gwen for this team. You know, Silas is still pretty bursty. The Volibear's bursty. Ezreal's just all about hitting who's in front of you and not getting too greedy. Hopefully recognizes that now after that 1,000 gold shutdown he gave over to Weibo, as the gold lead, after all of that, has narrowed a bit closer.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head for a Hope narrative and a Hope storyline. We've talked about Light quite a bit, but people forget Hope has made the World Semifinals before, the semifinals of the World Championships on JD Gaming, you know, quite a few years ago. And so this is a player that has had some experience, but he's always kind of been considered, I don't want to say the weak link, but certainly the less proven members of his, you know, successful teams. This is his chance to really step up. We need to see him make the most of it in these fights as Baron is started and the teleports are coming in.
Yeah, it's like Tarzan wants Weibo to come into them, wants that next fight here. As you called out, everybody TP's in that wasn't near this Baron pit. We redraw those similar fighting lines. Baron getting an MVP award for damage in Weibo's name. Chunks down multiple members of AL who don't have access to that Ocean Soul just yet. But again, AL's wave states are much better. Their minions alone
Shanks
get a
again.
top lane tier 2 turret, and Shanks is trying to set up a huge flank once more. The Crescent Guard hijack has been the most pivotal for him. Flandre gets charmed up on the one side, goes into the stasis, and Shanks jumps on top of Xiaohu. He has the Crescent Guard, but hits the Epsilon Duck on top of Light, forces out the Featherstorm. Can he find the kill? Light one auto from death, and Shanks sends him there with a postcard from this mid lane fight. Only the Realm Warp to save Weibo from utter catastrophe, but that means that all burners turn on to breathe. Finally, the tank Scion is down, Baron's up, and in 15 seconds, Ocean Soul is AL's to gain.
Oh, I know that you can look at the score lines and see that Hope and that Flandre and, Tarzan and Kael have had great games. Shanks is flexing on Weibo Gaming. We called out his signature pick, the Silas, the champion that I would consider him most known for. He is showcasing that here. They have vision of him. They do know that he's on this flank. Xiaohu does spot him out here, but they go all in on Flandre. Unlucky for them, he has stasis to be able to go into, and from this point onwards, Shanks with one of the most beautiful Crescent Guards you will ever see, does basically half health to everybody on Weibo Gaming. Light flashing into his own demise. Another team fight where he's a little bit mispositioned, and the creme de la creme is just Shanks surviving all of this on the Silas. It's unbelievable. Breathe, of course, finally dying, but how can you highlight anyone else? It's that Silas who continues to make the plays.
And again, for the narratives of anyone's legends, we know what we're going to get out of Tarzan game after game, how steady Kael is as one of those top supports. What pushes AL over the brink into potential LPL champions and big MSI threats is how much you can get out of Shanks and Hope from a game-to-game basis. You called out how this is his patent champion, and this is how oppressive AL looks when one of those two names I mentioned are playing at a high pedigree.
Yeah, I honestly, I'm just happy that we're in a game state where I can praise these guys. I spent so much of games 1 and 2, being negative about the plays that were happening, but now you can just look at AL.
Oh, Xiaohu, once again, frontlining a little too far.
This teleport.
Does survive, and yeah, well, luckily Breeze the tank will unstoppable onslaught, so he does commit the ult to get out. Xiaohu does not have TP to come back to this fight, so AL, they could turn towards the Baron. They're trying to set up to punish Light and Erha. At the very least, they're going to control this mid wave, and now they'll turn their attention to Baron. Xiaohu is having to run all the way back over here, and you can see how dark this river is. AL have complete control. Weibo have to very cautiously walk their way in. But how quick is this Baron take going without Hope hitting it? Flandre's doing a ton of damage. They finally get a shot of Baron. It's at half health as Erha gets chunked out by one combo from Hope. True Shot Braz comes across as well. Weibo, when do they go in? Because Shanks has found another master flank again. Has the Crescent Guard stolen. There is the Stormbringer through for Tarzan. He gets brunted and stunned up though once again. Doesn't matter. He sets up Shanks to run amok with the front line versus Tian. Next is Xiaohu. Shanks is setting up for a masterclass. It's absolute cinema, and the victors are anyone's legend. 5 for 1. Ace home thanks to their superstar Silas.
Oh my goodness, it's play after play after play for Shanks on this Silas. You just cannot contain the ability. They push down the top turret here. 20-second death timers on everybody. That's going to be game that Shanks ended up calling. The Baron dance does not go the way of Weibo, and AL will be walking their way to a 2-1 series lead.
And it's on the back of one of those less proven players. It's not Flandre, not Tarzan. It is Shanks. The man you're getting on your screen. I don't care. We're going to have discussions now. Throw player of the game up. I don't need time. It's Shanks. I mean, that was... I'm running out of words to describe it. That's where we're at this point. Hey, man.
Yeah, I mean, that was unbelievable. Like, one of the best games we've seen in the playoffs up until this point. Shanks gets his signature champion. He feels comfortable in the early game. I was so vocal. I was in draft. I was like, he knows the matchup, but I don't love the Silas into Ryze matchup. He can root you in fights. It can be a little bit difficult to win the laning phase. Throw it all out the window. Xiaohu was so far behind in the early game. We highlighted it around 20 minutes. He was sitting on Rod of Ages when Shanks was building his third item. Like, it was an absolute disaster for Xiaohu in the early game. And you give Shanks an inch on that champion, he's going to take your entire Nexus. And that's exactly what he did.
It was just... The positioning to start off those team fights, right? One of those flanks that he got, like, mid laners are dreaming of. in a game, like playing Silas. He got them every time. It was almost the same bush, like in the Baron Pit, over and over again. The same rinse and repeat. But it's one thing to get those flanks to be set up on the Silas. He just always found those priority targets. That was as about a perfect performance as you could get from a mid laner. And no, we're not talking about Xiaohu. No, we're not talking about Scout. We're not talking about Knight. We're talking about Shanks in one of the biggest single game wins of AL, all split long.
Yeah, and this guy's been doing it. Like, this is not a one-off. This guy has been so good for anyone's legend across 2025. You know, I've talked about Shanks' trajectory in years past. He's always shown flashes of being ready to be one of the best mid laners in the region. This is the year that he's really ascended into that upper echelon, and what a statement game to really prove that you want to talk about top 2 mid laners in the LPL, top 3 mid laners in the LPL. Shanks has to be considered in that conversation.
Definitely after that performance. And again, we were pointing it out some when talking about not just Shanks, but like Hope, who has a really good Ezreal performance. Also, he goes 7-1 this year on Ezreal, so that's a big pick for Hope that you got to keep track of. But again, if you can get single game wins where Shanks and Hope are the ones put up on that pedestal instead of us always talking about Tarzan, it bodes so well for the rest of this series now, but again, looking forward to what AL can look at full potential, because you need that to be an LPL champion. Full potential from your squad.
Absolutely. If you're not running as all 5, especially for a team like anyone's legend, whose strength really is playing as a team. And, you know, we use this phrase a lot to talk about teams that are overperforming. I've heard this mentioned for WE, but like, this team is more than the sum of their parts. Like, you hear that and you think, oh, the sum of their parts aren't very good. AL is more than the sum of their parts, and their parts are elite. Like, that's how scary AL is. Like, they all make each other better, and they all really step up and start to contribute towards each other. And I think that's what makes this team such a threat at the top of the LPL. If you're going to get performances like this out of Hope, who's having a career year, a performance like this out of Shanks, who's having a career year, you know, alongside what Tarzan, Flandre, what Kael, you know, first team all-pro types of players are already giving you. Like, there's not a lot of teams that can match that energy. And for Weibo, it's really just about, you know, getting back to comfort. Red side loss again. That win rate drops even lower.
It's a great call out. And now, okay, they technically can avoid another red side game. I forgot the 1v1 is here for game 5. So you have to win game 4. That's the big hurdle, right? Game 5, you have to win the 1v1 to get onto this blue side. It's a lot. The Weibo is at that point. But again, when AL put all those parts together and they're all humming along like an 800 horsepower engine, you get a game like this where one fight where they overextend was the only like light we saw at the end of the tunnel here for Weibo. This was more dominating and awe-inspiring than game 1, because the game 1 had this type of feel, but only towards the close. This time round, after that Grubs fight came in, we felt like it was over.
Yeah, I mean, it should have been over, right? Like, there's no reason for Weibo to be able to fight this out, and then AL started piling on the highlight plays. Like, that's how crazy this was. We forget that this was a calm, controlled game from AL through the first 15 minutes before Shanks found, you know, flank after flank after flank. That's just the icing on top of the cake of the fantastically consistent performance they had. You're right, the only mistake that they really made throughout this game was Hope Arcane shifting in and dying in that exchange, just going a little bit too deep. Outside of that, everything was so clean, and it's really the first game in the series where you can say that from start to finish, a team really was able to showcase everything they had to offer.
It's the first game in the series where, this is a good thing, by the way, we don't have to see Tarzan be the focal point of all of these plays. You see in this last fight, right? Volibear, he soaks up all this pressure, eats a bunch of stuns, CC lock, because he knows he's the spirit of this team. He understands all the sum of those parts, that if I'm getting knocked up, thrown in the air, and I'm dying, it's okay, because I've got the team behind me to bring it home. And that's the best scenario for superstars. It's like a big, broader conversation, right? Like, you always want these superstar players to be completely comfortable, be able to like carry home constantly. But when superstars like Tarzan can be the setup for the rest of their squad and be content with it, that's what not only makes AL so threatening as a team here, but so fun in my mind.
Absolutely. And that's where Tarzan thrives as a player. When you think about some of the mid laners he's gotten to play with over the course of his career, you think of Chovy, you think of Scout, you think of, players like that he's been able to enable. What a shocker, by the way. Player of the game goes to Shanks on the Silas. I think we saw this one coming just a little bit, but when Tarzan,
when the Nexus exploded.
yes, yeah. I think you could even make the argument you could have said it 25 minutes into the game. Like that's how great that performance was from him. But when Tarzan's able to find a mid laner that he can give those resources to, when you take, Tarzan's skill set of being a facilitator and an early game skirmisher and find someone to funnel, that is a dangerous position to be in.
Even more dangerous position is where Weibo is currently slated. They are down to their final spot. Down 2-1 to AL, who are looking to calm the storm of the chaos that has been the top 4 of Group Ascend. They want to make sure that 2 of those 4 get into that winner's final as expected, even if the matchup isn't necessarily what everyone thought. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's see what Weibo look like back on their blue side, back in the same spot they were against JDG, down 2-1. When they were able to make the comeback and get to this very matchup. Game 4 draft coming your guys' way with a ton of fearless champions off the board after another intermission.